This next example is going to be what's called a down round, or this is what can happen when you raise money on too high a valuation at first. So you go out and you raise your Series A money, and then something happens between Series A and Series B. It can be any number of things. The market can crater. It could be that you have some problems with technology development. It could be a competitor enters your space that makes the opportunity suddenly look not nearly as attractive. It could be that you're having issues getting your patents granted and you're not sure that you're going to have the patent protection that you thought you were going to have. For whatever reason, what was a fairly rosy picture suddenly looks not very rosy. And then what you're hoping for is if you have to have this down round that you can eventually dig your way out. And I'll illustrate that for you in just a minute. So let's give the example. And I want you to notice that there's only two things that really differ between this example and the perfect example. We still have angels investing $1 million at $1 a share, and the founder's employees getting $3 million. 2 years later, again, you go to that same VC and raise $3 million, but this time that something has happened. Instead of them paying $3 a share, your prospects don't look very good. You're kind of a very high risk deal. And so they're only willing to invest that $3 million at 50 cents a share. So now instead of you creating only 1 million shares of stock to cover that $3 million, you have to create 6 million shares of stock. So one thing that's different is the price. The second thing that's different is the VC says one of our terms is that all preferred shares have a 1x liquidation preference. The other name for this is called participating preferred stock. And I don't know why they call it participating, but what that really says is we're going to get a chunk of your profits before anybody else does, and you'll see that in the illustration. The but everything recovers, and just like we had in the first example, 3 years after the VCs invest, BigCo uh, buys them out buys your company for $40 million. So in terms of how much money is raised, how much money the company sold for, the number of years that are involved, everything is the same. What's different is what you had to pay for that VC money and the fact that you had to give all preferred shareholders a liquidation preference. Obviously, the angels like that because it says all preferred shares, so that means they get to play in that too. This full ratchet anti-dilution clause is going to be important in just a minute. What does that look like on the Excel? Whoops, sorry. So now we scroll down to the down round in the less than perfect world. All of this is the same. What happens here now is the VC gets those 6 million shares at 50 cents a share. The valuation of the company does go up. It goes from 4 million to 5 million between the A and the B round. But remember, there was that $3 million that the VCs put in right down here, the $3 million that the VCs put in. So what they're saying is before our money arrived, before the VC money arrived to make it 5 million, this $4 million company was worth $2 million. So now the entrepreneur has this struggle of they have 3 million shares, the angel still has 1 million, but now the VC has 6 million, so there's 10 million shares out, and the founders only control 30% of that. But wait, there's more. Remember that anti-dilution clause that I mentioned, which is fairly standard to have an anti-dilution clause in an equity deal. But what you're going to see is what I wrote into it was the most onerous from the standpoint of an entrepreneur anti-dilution clause. So here's how this one gets enacted. It's called a full ratchet anti-dilution clause. These guys and gals are not happy because they put in $1 a share to get their 1 million shares, and they just watch the VCs buy that same stock for 50 cents a share. And so this is where the anti-dilution clause in a full ratchet basically says you have to go back and reprice my shares, my angel shares, at the same price you just priced the VC shares. So now they're saying we put in $1 million back here, we should have gotten more than 1 million shares. We should have gotten 2 million shares at this new share price of 50 cents a share. So what happens is, and it's specified in the terms, that the founders, one way to do this would be to issue another 1 million shares. The VCs may not like that because that would dilute them out. So in this case, the clause says those extra shares come out of the founders pool. So now you have 3 million shares in the founders pool minus the 1 million shares that they have to give to the angels. They end up with 2 million shares. The angels have 1 million shares plus the 1 million shares through the anti-dilution clause. They have 2 million shares. So after this down round, there's 10 million shares out, and the founders only control 2 million shares. So they've been diluted down to 20%. Well, like I said, the good news is they recover and they're bought at $40 million for what looks to be $8 a share. But this is where this that $8 a share isn't correct. That would be, there's 10 million shares out. It should be 4 million a share. So let me change that right now. But again, but wait, there's more. Remember that liquidation preference? This is how it works. It says that all preferred stock got a 1x liquidation preference, which means 1 times their invested amount. So from this $40 million, the VCs get $3 million to repay their initial investment. That's the 1x. The angels get $1 million, again, to repay their original investment, the 1x. So if you take the 40 minus 3 minus 1, there's $36 million left. And that $36 million is to be spread between all of the shareholders. And the term for that is ratably distributed, which means, okay, now that we've gotten our liquidation preference, we get, we all share equally. So now there's $36 million to be distributed across those 10 million shares, or $3.60 per share. So when you go back and now price these guys' shares, the founders get 7.2 million, the angels get 8.2 million, the same 20%, but they get their $1 million back, and the VCs get 24.6 million. So if I were to go back and shift to this price, you'll notice it's almost completely inverted. The angels are about the same, but what the founders had in the first scenario, now the VCs have. And the vast majority of that is due to the down round. Not so much the anti-dilution clause, the down round. And so this is why it's not always a good deal to get a very high valuation, because if you get crammed down in the future, you can get severely diluted if things don't go according to plan. If we plug that into the IRR, you're going to see now the VCs come out looking very good. The angels are about the same. 8 million here, 8.2 million versus 8 million. And notice the angels still get that 52% rate of return. And that's what that anti-dilution kept them from taking the hit. That's the purpose of the anti-dilution clause is they still made about the same with the liquidation preference. They actually came out a little bit better, but not enough to make a difference. The VCs, on the other hand, because they invested in your deal when it looked very bad, they put a heavy risk premium there, and you can see they were rewarded. They, in essence, doubled their money every year for 3 years. Wouldn't we all like to have that deal? So that's called a down round. When you raise money at a lower share price in some point in the future than you raised earlier money on, that's called a down round. That is very much the not perfect world of finance. I'm going to do one more video because I want to show you a little bit more about using the IRR function and also why this liquidation preference exists. Join me for that.